is the freest place in Canada. I think that's still true. I was born there and grew up there, and it's certainly, I'm sure it's responsible for a lot of my views on freedom. It's certainly a rambunctious place too, political reform. Lots of political activity, always has been, but it's always been peaceful. I mean, think back through the generations, the Canadian Alliance, the Reform Party, before it, political leaders, whether it's Preston Manning, Stephen Harper, Jason Kenney until he went off the rails, Danielle Smith, like they're all from Calgary. You can go back further. You can go back 90 years to the Social Credit and Bill Aberhart, or you could go back 90 days to the Calgary School of freedom-oriented thinkers at the University of Calgary. So why is a city that is so free, mavericks, cowboys, why is it becoming so hostile to freedom of speech? I think, for example, of the ongoing war against Arthur Pawlowski. Now, I grant you, some of that is a provincial prosecution, but as he'll tell you if you ask him, he has been ticketed, fined, charged 100 times before all that by the city of Calgary, and same with other Christian pastors. That's just one example. And now there's this. Look at this story I see in Trudeau's state broadcaster. Calgary mayor threatens to fine protesters after drag event canceled. City will leverage street harassment bylaw for hate-motivated protests. Oh, really? Hate-motivated, hate-fueled. Whenever a politician says that, I think they're usually projecting. They have feelings of hate within them, and they can't really admit that, so they call their opponents hateful. It's like when a politician accuses someone of misinformation. Usually they're projecting. Even if they're not, it certainly requires mind reading. How does the mayor of Calgary know what's in someone's heart when they choose to peacefully protest? And it begs the question, do Canadians have the right to protest even if they don't have the correct feelings in their heart? Do you have to feel the right feelings and think the right thoughts in your head before you're allowed to protest anything in Calgary, including, in this case, the sexualization of children of tender years? Let me read a little bit from the state broadcaster, who couldn't be happier about this censorship and ask no questions about civil liberties. They don't care. They're Trudeau's people. They would bring in martial law if they could. So here's the story. Calgary's mayor says hate-fueled demonstrations cannot go on after a scheduled drag event was postponed for safety concerns due to a planned protest, adding the city will use a bylaw to fine people communicating hateful messages. Franca Gualtieri, executive director of Chinook Blast, said the organization is aware of protests that were planned for the festival's Drag on Ice, with DJ Gay Snakes at Olympic Plaza on Saturday and Sunday. We made the decision to postpone the programming to a later date when we can better ensure the safety of everyone, Gualtieri wrote in an emailed statement. That decision was made after discussions with performers, Gualtieri said. So there was no crime committed that we know about. I don't know if there was any cancel culture. Protesting an event is not the same as trying to shut it down. I think they actually canceled themselves here. Now, if there was some criminal threat, arrest the criminal, of course, but that's already in the criminal code. Here, let me read a little bit more. Recently, drag story times and all ages drag events in Calgary and across the country have been targeted by opponents, the most vocal of whom are largely members of alt-right groups. What? Where did you get that from? And what does it mean to target them? Do you mean to have a peaceful protest? Counter-protesters have shown up at many of those events to voice their support for drag performers. Calgary Mayor Jyoti Gondek said the city will be ticketing people to address certain types of protests. On Friday, she said the city of Calgary will leverage its existing street harassment bylaw to fine those who openly communicate hateful messaging in a public place. Okay, so do you catch that there? There apparently are going to be some protesters against Drag Queen Story Hour, all ages drag shows, and I can imagine their reasoning, because children should not be exposed to sexuality at such a tender year, straight or gay. But there are some counter-protesters apparently going to support it. So the mayor is saying that one side is welcome, the other is not. They're both going to be at the same place at the same time. And the mayor is saying that the bad guys aren't allowed. And the bad guys just happen to the people she disagrees with. Now, the CBC says that there's a lot of alt-right people who are going. I didn't know there were any alt-right people in Calgary. I didn't know they were involved in the anti-drag queen story hour movement. But you can see it's hyperlinked there. So I'm very curious. If you click on the link to see their source for this, they take you to another CBC story where they just say it. Then the other story is called Drag Story Times Have Become a Target of Hate. Why Some Families Love Them Anyway. As drag story times become a target, kids and families stand behind them. So this is what happens when you click on that alt-right wording. They don't have any proof. They don't name the alt-right. They just say it's true. The only name they have in this whole story is Tucker Carlson, who isn't alt-right. He's not Canadian. I don't think he is planning to come up to Calgary to protest this thing on the weekend. So twice now the CBC has said that the bad guys are alt-right. And they just refer to the other story that they've already published where they have no proof. It's really weird. But there are protesters on two sides. The mayor will bless one side and condemn the other and fine only one side for hate, which is a human emotion that is actually not a crime. Here's some tweets that the mayor has tweeted. I am personally blocked from her Twitter account, but we were able to get this nonetheless. Saddened and frustrated that Chinook Blast had to cancel a much-anticipated show with talented performers this weekend. Why? Because of planned protests rooted in hate and fear-mongering. I respect the decision and the need to prioritize public and performer safety, but this cannot go on. Okay, so again, you're mind-reading what's in people's hearts. They actually didn't show up, so you don't even know what they would have said and done. I had my book event canceled, by the way. I don't know if you remember, I had the Lebranos. I had a book event. I rented a theater in both Calgary and Edmonton. It was actually canceled not by me, but by the venue because they were threatened by members of the public. Could I get some help, or is it just for people who cancel their own events, who have the right political stripe, that they get the mayor's attention? Here she says, at council on January 17, I pushed for a better way to address protests rooted in hatred. I received confirmation that the City of Calgary will leverage our street harassment bylaw to fine those who openly communicate hateful messaging to stop them in the act. And she has a little video of herself boasting about it. Take a look.
We had a drag brunch at the Rec Room in the north of Calgary by our community of drag queens in Calgary who have done amazing work promoting inclusion and really raising awareness of how important it is to be a welcoming community. Unfortunately, some members of our population thought it would be a good idea to protest this event, which is, I'm just going to use my opinion, a horrible thing to do. I was very happy that CPS was there to provide a buffer and to ensure that everyone was safe and that the show could go on. My question is, do we have the ability, when a protest is rooted in hatred, to ticket people and shut this down? How does it work?
Mayor Gondek, I will seek to answer that question. I am responsible, of course, as the General Manager for Community Services for our bylaw work, and so it would be a bylaw that we would be pursuing that way. I imagine that there's some complexity to defining what we anticipate to have happen at protests. And so I don't feel like I have the crisp answer that I would like to. Right now, I'm happy to look into that, and I will send a note to all members of council when we have a good, clear answer to your question.
Thank you, GM Black. I appreciate that. I didn't expect you to have an answer immediately, but I do appreciate that you will look into it. We cannot have this kind of intolerance and hatred in our city, so thank you for pursuing it.
Got it. So protesting against young children being exposed to the sexuality of drag queens is a horrible thing to do. rooted in hatred, apparently. I don't know how she knows that. I bet if you ask the parents who were concerned, they'd probably talk about rooted in their love for the kids and their worry. But the mayor wants you to know she's got an enemies list, and it's horrible. She continues, we are also thankful to Calgary police for examining a different method to deal with a new era of protests that are a departure from peaceful assemblies of the past that required crowd management. The new reality is that some protests are designed to perpetuate fear and hate. Hang on. Who said that it wasn't peaceful? And who exactly is perpetuating hatred and fear here? And are those offenses, being hateful, being afraid, are those offenses that the city government can regulate, or any government? Can you tell people how they can feel and not? And will the city of Calgary police actually go along with this? Of course they will. Calgary's police will literally do anything they are told, including in this case, swearing, kicking, and threatening to taser a young hockey player outdoors on a city ice rink that was open. Look at these out-of-control Calgary police who were never disciplined. This is the kind of dirty cops they have in that Calgary Police Service. Take a look.
Down on the ground. To me. Down on the ground.
Why are you guys grabbing?
Dude, you guys just need to
Why are you guys grabbing?
Hey, orcs.
Not pulling. Okay. Ocean, get on the ground before you get tasered.
Why are you guys
Get on
grabbing?
the fucking ground right now.
Ocean. Guys, please. Why are
Get
you
on
guys
the ground
grabbing?
before I taser you. Ocean, right now.
Why are you tasering?
And if you thought that was a one-off, these are the same dirty cops, bad apples, rotten all the way to the chief, who arrested Arthur Pavlovsky in an El Chapo-style takedown on the highway. Take a look. Yeah, do you doubt those police will do whatever this censorious mayor demands of them? Let me read her fourth tweet. As a city that strives to be inclusive and welcoming, we have to provide safe places for the public to enjoy all that we have to offer without a small group of people creating safety issues by spreading mistruth and hate. We cannot tolerate hate masked as protest. Hang on, so spreading a mistruth is a safety issue now? And you end by saying what you yourself won't tolerate. You just won't tolerate the other opinion. In a diverse city, you won't tolerate. Holy moly, is that ever a pretzel, eh? So I went on the City of Calgary's street harassment bylaw page. They don't even pretend that it's not about silencing their opponents. Look at that image. This is the actual city official page. The headline is "Silence the Haters." Not protect the public, keep the peace, not even rebut the haters or debate them or refute them or tolerate them. Silence the haters. And of course the haters is anyone that Jody Gondek hates. And not for anything they've done or anything even that they've said, but for their fear and their hatred. We must demonize and silence the haters, except for Jody Gondek. She's allowed to hate whoever she hates. Here's the actual wording of the bylaw. It's actually just one section there, section 21C1, which defines the word harass as to communicate with a person in a manner that could reasonably cause offense or humiliation, including conduct, comment, or action that refers to the person's race, religious beliefs, color, disability, age, ancestry, place of origin, marital status, source of income, family status, gender, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, and includes sexual solicitation or advance. And you can see this was changed just last year. So it's now against the law to cause offense for a whole bunch of reasons, including, so it doesn't have to be racist or sexual in any way. It could be, but if you say something that could offend someone, for any reason, including for their gender expression, you're guilty. This makes it against the law to offend. That is not a real human right. That is a counterfeit human right. There is no such thing as the right not to be offended. Certainly a lot of Calgarians are offended by the drag queen story hour for young children. Being offended is not a real human right. And by the way, if you look at the punishments in this bylaw, look at Schedule A. If you carry a knife with you, it's a $50 fine. If you poop on the sidewalk, that's a $300 fine. But if you offend a drag queen, even peacefully, that is the largest fine the city will levy, $500. The city is using the word harassment. And they're doing it on purpose because they want to confuse you. They're using it to mean hurt feelings. Literally, you saw, if you cause offense. But the Criminal Code of Canada already has harassment as a crime. But it requires real fear and constant targeting of someone, not just one uncomfortable interaction. And it all has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, which is not the standard of proof under Calgary's bylaw. Let me tell you what real harassment is like, and let me show you what the Criminal Code of Canada says. No person shall, without lawful authority, and knowing that another person is harassed or recklessly as to whether the other person is harassed, engage in conduct referred to in subsection 2 that causes that other person reasonably, in all the circumstances, to fear for their safety or the safety of anyone known to them. And here's the list of things you're not allowed to do. And again, the test is, are you actually fearing for your safety? Here's the list of prohibited conduct. The conduct mentioned in subsection 1 consists of repeatedly following from place to place the other person or anyone known to them, repeatedly communicating with, either directly or indirectly, the other person or anyone known to them, besetting or watching the dwelling house or place where the other person or anyone known to them resides, works, carries on business, or happens to be, or engaging in threatening conduct directed at the other person or any member of their family. And again, it has to genuinely make them afraid. That's harassment, and it has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. What we have in Calgary is a mayor attempting to criminalize her political opponents, not for stalking or besetting or causing fear that you're going to be hurt, but just for causing offense to drag queens based on their gender expression. Now, this bylaw is obviously unconstitutional because it's a violation of freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, but also, you heard the mayor, you're not allowed to have certain feelings. So it's a violation of freedom of thought. But it's also a violation of our Constitution's jurisdictional sections. Criminal law is something that only the federal government can enact. You know, we're going to make this a big story at Rebel News, and I'll tell you why. Because we have to nip this in the bud. The idea that politicians can ban their peaceful opponents, like the truckers. If Jyoti Gondek, the mayor of Calgary, has her way, she'd probably invoke martial law on the streets, just like Trudeau did, and seize bank accounts if she could. We're going to do everything we can to stop this. It starts with anyone out there who actually receives a fine or a ticket to contact us. And we'll provide them with a lawyer to defend themselves. And more importantly, we will challenge the constitutionality of this censorship law. If you or someone you know is charged with this outrageous censorship provision, if you or someone you know is the subject of a hateful campaign by the mayor to shut them up, she's the hater, send me an email to Ezra@rebelnews.com, Ezra@rebelnews.com. And if you've got the ticket, we'll fight it for you. And more than that, we'll challenge the law itself. That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest, either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.